H.P. Lovecraft, The Horror at Red Hook. Chapter 4. Police methods are varied and ingenious. Malone, though unostentatious rambles, careful, casual conversations, well-timed offers of hip-pocket liquor, and judicious dialogues with frightened prisoners, learned many isolated facts about the movement whose aspects had become so menacing. The newcomers were indeed Kurds, but of a dialect obscure and puzzling to the exact physiology. Such of them as worked lived mostly as dockhands and unlicensed peddlers, though frequently serving in the Greek restaurants and tending corner newsstands. Most of them, however, had no visible means of support and were obviously connected with underground and underworld pursuits, of which smuggling and bootlegging were the least indescribable. They had come in steamships, apparently tramp freighters, and had been unloaded by stealth upon moonless nights in rowboats which stole under a certain wharf and followed a hidden canal to a secret subterranean pool beneath a house. This wharf, canal, and house Malone could not locate, for the memories of his informants were always exceedingly confused, while their speech was to a great extent beyond even the ablest of interpreters. Nor could he gain any real data upon the reasons for their systemic importation. They were reticent about the exact spot from which they had come, and were never sufficiently off guard to reveal the agencies which had sought them out and directed their course. Indeed, they developed something like acute fright when asked the reasons for their presence. Gangsters of other breeds were equally taciturn, and the most that could be gathered was that some god or great priesthood had promised them unheard-of powers and supernatural glories, and rulerships in a strange land. The attendance of both newcomers and old gangsters at Saddam's closely guarded nocturnal meetings was very regular, and the police soon learned that the erstwhile recluse had leased additional flats to accommodate such guests as knew his password, at last occupying 3 entire homes and permanently harboring many of his queer companions. He spent but little time now at his Flatbush home, apparently going and coming only to obtain and return books, and his face and manner had attained an appalling pitch of wildness. Malone twice interviewed him, but was each time brusquely repulsed. He knew nothing, he said, of any mysterious plots or movements, and had no idea how the Kurds could have entered or what they even wanted. His business was to study undisturbed the folklore of all the immigrants of the district, a business with which policemen had no legitimate concern. Malone mentioned his admiration for Saddam's old brochure upon the Kabbalah and other myths, but the old man's softening was only momentary. He sensed an intrusion and rebuffed his visitor in no uncertain way, till Malone withdrew disgusted and turned to the other channels of information. What Malone would have unearthed, could he have worked continuously upon the case, we shall never truly know. As it was, a stupid conflict between city and federal authority suspended the investigation for several months, during which the detective was busy with his other assignments. But at no time did he lose interest, or fail to stand amazed at what began to happen to Robert Saddam, just at the time when a wave of kidnappings and disappearances spread its excitement over New York. The unkempt scholar embarked upon a metamorphosis as startling as it was absurd. One day he was seen near Burrow Hole, with a clean-shaven face, well-trimmed hair, and a tastefully immaculate attire. And on every day thereafter, some obscure improvement was noticed upon him. He maintained his new fastidiousness without interruption. He added to it an unwonted sparkle of eye, a crispness of speech, and began little by little to shed the corpulence which had so long deformed him. Now frequently taken for less than his age, he acquired an elasticity of step and a buoyancy of demeanor to match his new tradition, and shewed a curious darkening of the hair, which somehow did not suggest a dye. As the months passed, he commenced to dress less and less conservatively, and finally astonished his new friends by renovating and redecorating his Flatbush mansion. He then threw open in a series of receptions, summoning all of his acquaintances he could remember, and extended a special welcome to the fully foreign relatives who had so lately sought his restraint. Some attended through curiosity, others through duty, but all were suddenly charmed by the dawning grace and urbanity of that former hermit. He had, he asserted, accomplished most of his allotted work, and having inherited some property from a half-forgotten European friend, was about to spend his remaining years in a brighter second youth, which ease, care, and diet had made possible to him. Less and less was he seen as at Red Hook, and more did he move in the society to which he was originally born. Policemen noticed a tendency of the Gankers to congregate at the old stone church and dance hall, instead of at the basement flat in Parker Place, though the latter in recent annexes still overflew with noxious life. Then 2 incidents occurred, wide enough apart, but both of intense interest in the case as Malone envisioned it. One was a quiet announcement in the Eagle of Robert Satem's engagement to a Miss Cornelia Gettison of Bayside, a young woman of excellent position, and distantly related to the elderly bridegroom-elect, whilst the other was a raid upon the dance-hall church by city police, after a report that the face of a kidnapped child had been seen for a second at one of the basement windows. Malone had participated in this raid, and studied the place with much care when inside. Nothing was found. In fact, the building was entirely deserted when they visited, but the sensitive Celt was vaguely disturbed by many things about the interior. They were crudely painted panels he did not like, panels which depicted sacred faces with peculiar worldly and sardonic expressions, and which occasionally took liberties that even a layman's sense of decorum would scarcely countenance. Then, too, he did not relish the Greek inscription upon the wall above the pulpit, an ancient incantation which had once stumbled upon in Dublin college days, and, when read, literally translated, O friend and companion of night, thou who rejoice in the baying of dogs and spilt blood, who wanderest in the midst of shades among the tombs, who longest for blood and brings terror to mortals, Gorgo Momo, thousand-faced moon, look favorably on our sacrifice. When he read this, he shuddered, and thought vaguely of the cracked bass organ notes he fancied he had heard beneath the church upon certain nights. He shuddered again at the rust around the rim of a metal basin which stood upon the altar, and paused nervously when his nostrils seemed to detect a curious and ghastly stench from somewhere in the neighborhood. That organ memory haunted him, and he explored the basement with particular acidity before he left. The place was very hateful to him. Yet, after all, were the blasphemous panels and inscriptions more than mere crudities perpetuated by the ignorant. By the time of Saddam's wedding, the kidnapping epidemic had become a popular newspaper scandal. Most of the victims were young children of low class, but the increasing number of disappearances had worked up a sentiment of strongest fury. Journals clamored for action from the police, and one small Butler Street station sent its men over Red Hook for clues, discoveries, and criminals. Malone was glad to be on the trail again, and took pride in a raid on one of Saddam's Parker Place houses. There, indeed, no stolen child was found, despite the tales of screams and a red sash picked up by the airway. But the paintings and rough inscriptions upon the peeling walls of most of the rooms, and the primitive chemical laboratory in the attic, all helped to convince the detective that he was the track of something tremendous. The paintings were appalling. Hideous monsters of every shape and size, parodies upon the human outline, which cannot fully be described, only seen. The writing was in red. It varied from Arabic to Greek, Latin, and Hebrew letters. Malone could not read much of it, but what he was able to decipher was portentous and cabalistic enough. One frequently repeated motto was in a sort of Hebrew's Hellenistic Greek, and suggested the most terrible demon evocations of the Alexandrian decadence. Hel, helium, sulfur, Emmanuel, Sabbath, Agla, Tetragrammatos, Agosethos, Ikios, Athanatos, Ave Hava, Adonai, Sadeh, Homo Vision, Messias, Eshue. Circles and pentagrams all loomed upon every hand, and told indubitably of the strange beliefs and those aspirations of those who dwelt so squalidly here. In the cellar, however, the strangest thing was found: a pile of genuine gold ingots, covered carelessly with a single piece of burlap, and bearing upon their shining surface the same weird hieroglyphics which adorned the walls. During the raid, the police encountered only a passive resistance from those squinting Orientals that swarmed from every door. But finding nothing relevant, they had to leave all as it was. But the precinct captain wrote Saddam a note advising him to look closely into the character of his tenants and protégés in a view of the growing public clamor.